Business News now on some strong advice for developing economies from the International Monetary Fund. African nations must focus on ensuring food supplies even as the developed world grapples with soaring energy prices, and the lot of African residents could improve greatly once governments improve taxation. That's according to the fund's latest fiscal assessment. Well, let's cross over to Washington, D.C., where Arise correspondent Nkechi Nnanna has been covering the IMF meeting. So good to see you, Nkechi. So the IMF apparently more worried about African food supplies than energy supplies.
Yes, definitely. This morning, as they announced the fiscal monitor, it was basically the center of the message was that emerging economies, African economies, need to prioritize. I can't say that enough on food insecurity, even as the advanced economies are grappling with prices. And so we need to prioritize our policies and programs, which is vital. And so that, and you know that the governments are operating within tight budgets. So what we're seeing now, according to the World Bank, 120 million people in Africa into suffering from food insecurity. There's not enough food. Even the food that's available is just not nutritious. And so what the government should not try to do is continue to limit price increases through, price controls, subsidies, which were singled out, or tax cuts, because they say these measures are just too expensive or the outcome is just ineffective, Charles.
Well, it sounds quite interesting, but also a sort of salutary note as well. And the fund, Nkechi, is also concerned about poor tax collection in developing nations, perhaps justifiably so.
Yes, definitely. African countries already pre-pandemic had low levels of tax ratio relative to GDP, and this has definitely declined, and it's even harder for the governments to respond to crises or just manage their debt or even deliver basic services, basic amenities for their people, Charles. So it's important for them to step up their efforts on domestic revenue mobilization and just trying to build the state's capacity to respond to all these challenges. And specific to Nigeria, singled out as just doing the opposite of what the fiscal monitor advises in the fiscal policy, working together with monetary authorities to stabilize the economy. Is in Nigeria, they're pursuing an expansionary fiscal policy. The fund is just saying, look, Nigeria, you need to focus on what really matters, what's urgent to Nigeria, food insecurity. Something out important to mention was basically an advice on oil exporting countries to take advantage of rising commodity revenues, which would have tailored to Nigeria, but as we all know, we're not benefiting from these commodity revenues, partly because of large subsidies which were mentioned to be expensive and other issues with production, basically other pressures that are more specific to Nigeria, and also climate change. I was just listening to your interview with our political editor there. Those numbers are just a grime, Charles. 31 states out of 36 states affected by climate change. And so climate adaptation, safety nets have to be put in place to help fiscal policy be more consistent with the efforts that are helping economic stability, basically.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Nkechi. We appreciate your update and your assessment. And Nkechi Nnanna is Arise correspondent, and she was talking to me there from the venue of the IMF meetings in Washington.